Welcome, everybody. We are so glad that you're able to join us this morning for this celebration of the reinstallation of the fully restored Portland landmark, the Hay and Peabody clock on Upper Congress Street in Portland, right out in front of the Francis Hotel. We're so glad that you're able to join us. I'm David Swardlick, and along with my partners in this restoration project, Nate DeLois and Tony DeLois, co-owners of the Francis, we really are delighted to have you gather here this morning with us. In a few minutes, you'll hear from some of the experts who've been involved in the restoration project and others who have been very helpful in making this project possible. So we'll show a short video that tells a little bit of the story of the restoration, and you'll be able to hear from other members of the restoration team. And then we'll have a discussion, an informal conversation with some of the folks you see here this morning. You'll see Sarah Hansen, Executive Director of Greater Portland Landmarks, Tim Von Ryan, current President of Maine Chapter 89 of the National Association of Watch and Clock Collectors, Jonathan Taggart, Principal of Taggart Objects Conservation, and Tony DeLois and Nate DeLois, as I said, co-owners of the Francis. And you'll hear from others in the video. So after the video, we'll hope to answer some of your questions and take some comments by way of the Facebook or YouTube platform that you're viewing us on this morning. So please do feel free to make comments or ask questions, and we will relay those to the panel. So we invite you to sit back, relax, enjoy the video, and then we'll have a chance to have a conversation with you. Thanks very much for joining us. This historic landmark, the beautiful Hay and Peabody street clock, has stood on this spot for 95 years. It was installed in 1925 to mark the 25th anniversary of the Hay and Peabody Company. Unfortunately, it had fallen into terrible disrepair and was on the verge of crumbling. Now, with this meticulous restoration and through the efforts of many people in the community, this beautiful landmark will stand strong for generations to come.
My name is Sarah Hansen. I'm the Executive Director of Greater Portland Landmarks, and we're here today to celebrate the rededication of the Hay and Peabody clock. This clock was listed on our Places in Peril list in 2017. And we are thrilled, absolutely thrilled at the result of the restoration. It's been a really inspiring collaboration with the Francis Hotel and the developers of that project since its inception, and just couldn't be happier with the results.
Hi, I'm Tony DeLois. I'm one of the owners and operators of the Francis Hotel, and I am so excited to present to the City of Portland, the community, our neighborhood, all the historical buffs around the U.S., the restoration of this really incredible Seth Thomas original called the Hay and Peabody clock. The project really started for me five years ago when we put the building, the Francis, on the historic register and started our historic renovation. And though we opened in 2017, there was always this missing piece, and that was the corner of our property. Really so excited to be able to share this with the City of Portland, all of our guests. We've had guests coming from all over the U.S., and everyone always asks us about the clock. It was lifted off site, and we were able to meticulously restore it and bring it back to all its glory and place it as a cornerstone of our project.
Hi, my name is Tim Von Ryan, and I'm the current president of the Maine Chapter 89 of the National Association of Watch and Clock Club. It's a national organization. Each state has its own chapter. We have maybe about 40 to 50 members. And you may see people behind me, they're all members who have volunteered their time to restore all the clockworks as part of this old Seth Thomas clock. People stop on the sidewalk and they say, boy, that's a beautiful clock. I've never seen that running since I've lived here, and it's just really rewarding to see that. So hopefully everybody can enjoy this clock. It's really a special thing for the City of Portland.
The clock was in terrible condition when I first looked at it, and I'd seen it for years. The outside, the paint was flaking and which was obviously a problem. But once I started to take the clock apart, it was quite clear that the corrosion had done substantial damage on the surfaces that we could not see. My biggest challenge was actually getting everything apart, because many of the iron screws were corroded into the cast iron pieces. So many of them were broken or would break when trying to remove them. Choosing the right paint color was also a bit of a challenge. There were many layers of paint on the clock, most of them in some kind of range of black to dark green. It was a real pleasure working on the clock. As a conservator, my goal was the long-term preservation of the clock. The first maintenance of the clock should be 25 years from now, when it probably needs to be repainted, and it will be a long time before it will ever have to be taken apart again.
Hi, I'm Harry Hepburn. I'm team leader of this restoration, and we're here because this clock was only one of around 74 that were ever built by Seth Thomas. This is a number 4 movement. They're very similar to a tower clock movement, and we have 6 or 8 guys that are involved with the restoration of this movement, and they've all had various functions, but all have been totally involved in fixing this clock and making it what it is right now. All of the things that we've restored, right from the dials, the motion works, all of the little universal joints that operate the dials and the hands and the movement itself have all been totally restored. Now we're putting it back together again, and hopefully it'll be here for another 100 years.
I'm Paul Fournier. I'm with the National Association of Watch and Clock Collectors, and we teamed up to restore the movement in this Seth Thomas post clock. The clock mechanism was done at my shop in Scarborough. It's completely disassembled, clean, polished, repainted, several bushings, and it's been running great now for over a month. Today we're installing it in the restored case, and it should be fine to run for many decades. Overall, the most challenging part was the case, because it was in such bad condition. We were really lucky with the movement that all of the parts still existed, even though it had been converted to a motor-driven movement. Everything existed that we could convert it back to a weight-driven, mechanized movement. The movement is on a 6-hour automatic rewind to wind the weights up, so we don't have to do any regular winding or other maintenance to it.
Hi, this is Mary Kay Muncie. I'm a resident of Bramhall condominiums. Majority of the residents who live in Bramhall Road contributed to it, so we're now thrilled that it's back and it's our landmark, and it's a place that we know we can turn into our area, and it points us out as a special location.
We'd like to acknowledge the tremendous contribution of time and talent made by Maine Chapter 89 of the National Association of Watch and Clock Collectors for their meticulous restoration of this beautiful clock, and also to Jonathan Taggart of Taggart Objects for all of his craftsmanship in restoring this 1,800-pound wrought iron case and all of its ornamentation. And we'd like to thank Mike Hebert of Hebert Construction for providing a strong new foundation for the clock on this spot. And we'd like to thank Greater Portland Landmarks and the historic preservation staff of the City of Portland for their inspiration and their guidance on this project.
It's really so amazing and so beautiful, and historic artifacts like this, we know, are especially vulnerable to loss because of neglect, deferred maintenance, or removal for resale, which makes this Portland clock's painstaking restoration all the more remarkable. I don't live too far from where this clock is located, and I often walk that stretch of Congress Street, and it really has enlivened the area, and it's so beautiful, and what used to be kind of in your peripheral vision is now something you really focus on. So I think it's really, really exciting, and I just want to say thank you. And I also just want to be able to say thank you to the city's historic preservation staff who worked closely with the building owners on the clock restoration project. It's these kind of saves that are due in large part because the city adopted a preservation program to ensure that important elements of our past are protected and celebrated.
This project would not be possible without the generous financial contribution from many. I'd like to thank the owners of the Francis, Nate DeLois, Tony DeLois, and Jeff Harder, and also acknowledge the generous contributions of the neighbors here at Bramhall Row, with special thanks to Peter MUNCIE. And I'd also like to thank the partners of Bramhall Row LLC and Center West LLC for not only contributing to this clock restoration project, but also for their investments in this section of Upper Congress Street. Well, we're back. We hope that you enjoyed that little look at the story of the restoration of the clock and hear from some of the specialists and experts and engaged community members that made this project possible. It's been so much fun to work on over these past several years, so we're really glad that you're a part of it with us now. I would like to say a special thank you to Mayor Kate Snyder for joining in with her kind words this morning, and a special shout out to Joshua Gates of Avenue Media for producing not only today's event, but this terrific video that will be part of our archive. And speaking of archives, all of us have collected hundreds of photographs of the clock before restoration, during restoration, and now in its beautiful new condition. So if anybody has any questions about the process or might like to share in some of those images to learn more about the project, we'll make that possible for you. So those are part of the history of maybe the next 100 years of the clock's story. So now we once again encourage you to send in your comments and ask questions by way of Facebook or YouTube. And we're going to have an informal discussion. I maybe start things off in our conversation. I'll pick on Sarah Hansen, again, Executive Director of Greater Portland Landmarks. And Sarah, in 2017, Greater Portland Landmarks placed the Hay and Peabody clock on its list of places in peril. So can you tell us, what does Landmarks hope happens when a place, or in this case, an object, get put on that list of places in peril? What do you hope happens at that point?
Sure. Thanks, David. Delighted to be here today. This is a very fun thing to celebrate. So the Places in Peril list was started in 2012. And the goal of the list is to bring awareness and attention to different historic buildings, places, sites, structures, objects, and what those threats are that are facing them, and then hopefully, educate people, raise awareness, and get resources allocated so that we can work towards whatever a save looks like for that particular issue or challenge. So when we placed this on the list in 2017, the hope was obviously to rally people around this clock, recognize its importance in Portland, and what a great catalyst the restoration of this could be for the rest of the neighborhood, along with of course, the amazing work at the Francis Hotel. So I think this is a very, very delightful thing to say that it's saved now.
Well, that's great. Well, we'll come back to you in a few minutes, but
Sure.
Maybe think about some other places in peril in the Portland area that you might want to mention. I'll come back and let you think about that a little bit.
Okay.
And, don't want to put
There's
you on
a
the
list.
spot. Maybe I'll ask Jonathan. Jonathan, you probably have one of the more interesting businesses that I've ever come across. Curious about the kinds of things that you might typically restore, if there's such a thing as typical, and whether or not this has been a typical restoration project for you.
Well,
Jonathan Taggart of Taggart Objects Conservation, by the way.
I would like to thank you again for putting on this presentation, and it's been a pleasure to work with everyone on this project. this project is both typical and not typical of the work I do. Most of the projects I work on are unique, and that's what makes it typical, is that I will never work probably on another clock like this. I've worked on the restoration of the Lincoln Park Fountain, which again is unique. What is typical is that the actual treatment process and the methods and materials are pretty similar to what I work on a regular basis. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it sounds like most everything is not typical, but there are some things that they have in common. Like a lot of the work you do is on iron and metal and very heavy objects. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm technically an objects conservator, but I mostly work on outdoor sculpture. A lot of cast iron like this, a lot of bronze, you know, some wooden objects like totem poles, and but that's, you know, a whole different range of treatment.
I like when in the video you said the clock was in terrible condition.
Well, it was. That's a total truth. I mean, the thing that I found most shocking in taking it apart is you have to understand that that globe, that ball on top, probably weighs more than 1,000 pounds all by itself, and it goes down to that little tiny base. And what holds that whole thing up is a pair of structures. One of them is the individual cast sections bolted together, in some cases with very small screws. And then in the center, there's a large structural pipe that bolts the whole thing together. And in the combination, they were both failing. Is that some of the screws that held the ball in place, some of them were completely missing or corroded down to only a small little neck. Plus, the big bolt itself was corroded to a very thin area in the bottom. Plus, the foundation had shifted, so the clock was tilted at an angle. So the potential of it actually collapsing was really great. So when I say terrible, I meant terrible.
And you know, we all see the outside of this big cast iron case, but there's an awful lot that goes on inside, and that's primarily where Tim and all his colleagues came into the picture. Tim, you know, I don't think I had ever heard of an organization called the National Association of Watch and Clock Collectors. Now, that sounds like, you know, kind of a passive organization, but you guys are nothing like passive. You got very involved and worked on this project for several years. Tell us a little bit first, what is the NAWCC? How many Maine members are there in the chapter? And you know, why did you take on this project?
Sure, David. A couple of things. Yeah, we're not as well publicized as the NFL for sure, but we may get there someday. I also want to echo Jonathan's comments first. Just great video. That's the first time I've seen that, and really nicely done. And kudos to all the people that have been involved in this project. It's been a great project. I have to tell Sarah that the Places in Peril program works in this case. That's how we became aware of the project. We saw, I think we saw it in the paper advertised, and being a clock club, one that loves, our members love timepieces, you know, we thought this would be a really great opportunity to get involved. So it works, Sarah. The National Association of Watch and Clock Collectors is just that. It's a national group of people that are interested and really love, sort of addicted to clocks, and you'll find all their members have tons of clocks in their collection. So we really appreciate clocks, and you know, we want to see them kept alive. There's so many great timepieces out there. Each being a national organization, it's organized by local chapters, and almost every state or many states have their own chapter, and we have one in Maine, Chapter 89. About 40 or 50 members in the chapter, and we got together and decided, a small team of us, that hey, this would be a great project for our chapter to get involved in. And so there are about 8 or 9 really dedicated individuals, and if this were, you know, different times, I could probably bring them all up and announce them, but these people were really dedicated, and they were there for, disassembling the clock, doing a ton of work on the insides of the clock down at Paul's shop and elsewhere, and then reinstalling it. So it's just been a great thing for our chapter. And we really appreciate it. And as in the video it was remarked, people would just stop by on the sidewalk and really appreciate the clock. So it's going to be enjoyed by many, many people. So we're happy to be a part of that.
That's awesome. And again, I didn't reintroduce Tim Von Ryan, current president of the Maine Chapter 89. Also, I want to remind our audience out there in the world, please take a moment to send a question or a comment in by Facebook or YouTube. We'll be fielding those as they come along. And I wanted to, speaking of the involvement of Chapter 89 and tapping into an amazing amount of expertise that resides right here in Maine. It's quite remarkable, the specialists and experiences members have. But Nate DELOIS, I'll turn to you. You took the initiative several years ago to reach out to clock experts, not only around Maine, but New England and all across the country, based on networking, to get quotes. We didn't know about Chapter 89 at that time, and you went out to get bids or quotes on a total restoration of the clock, and you got some pretty shocking budgetary numbers. So can you just talk about that process and then how the team came about doing this with a different approach for a lot less money?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, David. So when we started this project back in 2015, 2016, there were a few things that were pretty clear. One was that we needed to find experts that knew about the clock. For as little as I knew about the hotel business when we started building the Francis, I knew even less about clocks. We didn't even know who to call. Another thing that was really clear was how important it was for the community members. We're doing this work at the Francis, and, as soon as construction started and we'd be standing outside, having a meeting, people would be walking by on the street. All they wanted to talk about was the clock. They didn't care what we were doing to the building. They just wanted to know, when was the clock going to get fixed? When was it going to start to work again? So we knew it was an important project. So I think we started calling experts just by, the new fashioned way. We Googled, called some people who we didn't know, got some estimates that were really all over the board. We actually had some people call us because they had read about the project in the paper. And we had estimates that went up to $120,000, $150,000 for the entire restoration. One guy, we got one quote from somebody for about $120,000. He sent it, and then he called me and said, but I don't really want to do it because I don't really know how to do it. So like, all right, well, we can throw that one out. So we didn't know what we were doing. We needed to find people who did. Not probably, but the most important call that we made was to Greater Portland Landmarks, where we basically clean and said, we have no idea what we're doing. We need some help. And so, we met with Sarah and her predecessor, probably back in 2016, 2017, told them what we wanted to do. And we started to put together a plan. I think the first step of the plan was getting put on the Places in Peril. And then through that, as Tim mentioned, we were introduced to Harry HEPBURN and Tim, and they really brought so much expertise to the table and generosity. They knew that, our budget was pretty tight. The Francis was just in its first year of operation. It's a very small business. It's a 15-room hotel. So, we didn't have $150,000 to put towards a major renovation like this. So, they really were very generous in working with us in donating their time to do the work that they did. And then I think they introduced us to Jonathan. Truthfully, you can stop me if I'm wrong. I can't quite remember how we were introduced to Jonathan, but it was clear from our first meeting with Jonathan that he was the right guy to be talking to about doing the entire structure. And he understood that budget was tight, and his estimate for work certainly reflected that. And later in the project, after the clock came down about a year ago, and went up to, the structure went up to Jonathan's to be worked on. As we got closer to the reinstallation date, there were still other costs that we, needed to figure out. A new foundation for the clock, electrical for the clock. All these costs end up really adding up. So, we were lucky enough to be working with Mike Hebert and Hebert Construction on another project. And we just told him about the clock, and he donated his time. I mean, Mike was there digging a hole, to do some of the foundation work. It was amazing, their generosity, to really get us over the hump to this final stage of being able to install it. So, all in with everybody's support, with the support of the Bramhall Row residents, who chipped in to help get it done. I mean, we got it done, I would say, for less than half of probably the average estimate that we got back in 2017. So, it probably took a little longer because we were trying to get all the pieces together ourselves, which was a little bit out of our comfort zone. But, once we really turned things over to Tim and Harry and the guys at the watch and clock collectors, and then Jonathan as well, they took it from there. Pretty awesome job that they did. It's amazing too, thinking about, the way the clock looked. And once the construction was done and the Francis looked really beautiful, the clock really stood out. I mean, it stood out before, but it really stood out as, whoa, what are they doing with that clock? And so that first year of operation was tough because people would come and check in, and almost always the first question would be, when are you guys going to do that clock? It wasn't looking right. And even in our, at least personally, I couldn't imagine it coming out the way that it did. It's the work that these guys did is so amazing. It looks better than I could have ever imagined. So, really kudos to the guys who did the work.
That's great, Nate. Thanks so much for giving us a recap of that. And you mentioned when you got the restoration of the Mellon Bolster House, also known as the Hay and Peabody building, accomplished. That really made a contrast between the beautiful restoration of the building and the place in peril out front, which was the clock. And that brings me to Tony. And by the way, while we continue our conversation, we're getting some good questions in from Facebook and YouTube and Instagram. So I want to encourage folks out there to get those in. We're going to turn to those comments and questions in just a moment. But I wanted to ask Tony DeLois, one of the owners of the Francis. You said in the video that this project really started for you in 2015 when you and your partners were able to place the Mellon Bolster House on the National Register of Historic Places and then began the restoration of that beautiful building. So I just want to ask you, what's it been like to start up a boutique hotel in a historic building, and then what does the restoration of the clock mean to you and the guests, and maybe how you talk about the hotel?
Okay. Well, I think starting the boutique hotel, you talk about uniqueness. We're in the western part of the peninsula. There's not a lot of hotels around here, so just by nature, we're creating a little bit of a unique property, 15 rooms. It's a historic renovation. Everything's a little bit different on the inside, which just lends to a really good story. It allows us to talk about each individual room or piece of the hotel as something unique to itself, even not only within Portland, but also within the hotel, whether it's the historic floors in one of the rooms or the framing of the doors. We really enjoy telling that story. We have completed our third year, and I just gave a tour, a week ago, and it never gets old, being able to show, some of the amazing craftsmanship that took place back in the 1880s to construct this building. And the reason why I said this, it started back, 5 years ago, is when my brother and I were standing at Tandem across the street and looking at the building, and as he said, you see this big, black, 2-ton iron clock sort of tilting to the left. And even though it looked like that, we still decided that it would be our insignia. Our business cards have a little picture of it on the back. And, you know, as you said, you know, people coming in, they're kind of wowed by the restoration. And the next question is, well, what are you doing with the clock? What are you doing with the clock? And we've been talking about it for a really long time, and just felt like we were always going to be 95% done until you know, we were able to get the clock fully restored. It's been gone for a whole year, and during the past year, people have been like, "Well, what'd you do with the clock?" You know, so it's been about the clock. You know, just seeing it come back on. I mean, it is beautiful, and the way it lights up. I mean, it's got this beautiful glow, and now, you know, when we welcome guests at the hotel, we can just say, "Hey, you know, take a left at the," or, you know, depending on what kind of direction they come in, at this gorgeous, beautiful clock. You know, it's not something that we're going to ignore. It's something that we're certainly going to be very proud about. And, you know, we obviously, like Jonathan said, you know, we get 25 years until we even have to put paint on it. We're just really, really happy. It really completes the full project, you know, and you know, sharing it with the community and being able to show our guests, you know, sort of what really great things can happen when people come together to restore something like this.
Fantastic. That's great. And I do want to mention, we're getting some nice questions in from people watching out there, and I want to get to those now. You know, when you look around the immediate neighborhood of the Francis, and then up and down Congress Street from, I'll say, Longfellow Square to Maine Medical Center, there's been so many exciting things happening in the past several years. A number of years ago, Peloton Labs came in and brought a lot of people to work at that co-working space. Tandem Bakery and Cafe has brought thousands and thousands of people to the immediate neighborhood. Of course, Longfellow Square is full of restaurants and shops, and there are galleries, many other projects. And, you know, the owners of the Francis have had great success and are involved in the development of another project across the street in what was a gas station and convenience store, and currently has been the site of a really important art installation developed by our friends at Indigo Arts. And there's been so much happening in the neighborhood. It's very exciting to see. We have some questions, and I'll also encourage our panelists to jump in wherever they see fit. But let me ask one first. Maybe Tim might want to take a crack at this one. By Instagram, somebody asks, what are some of the other famous Seth Thomas clocks we might see around the country? Do any come to mind?
Yeah, no, that's no problem. So as it was mentioned in the video, there are somewhere between 70 and 80 of these types of clocks ever built by Seth Thomas. And one of them is at the National Association of Watch and Clock Collectors. So you can go to the museum in Columbia, Pennsylvania, and you'll see it standing. It looks very much like this one, four-sided, almost identical. And there, they also have a movement in the museum running, so you can see that. There's another one to be restored down at the American Watch Clock Museum in Bristol, Connecticut. And that one, you know, being a national organization, we have access to all these other members. And so we've consulted with some of these people to, you know, understand what they're seeing, how they've fixed things in the past, get their expertise as well. And so that one, I think I'm waiting for that one to be dedicated. It should be up soon, but that one's in Bristol, Connecticut. So, so there's a couple around. On YouTube, you'll see a few privately owned as well. So there are a few around, but again, this one is kind of rare in that it uses an electric motor to lift the weights. And that's unique for this clock. But again, there are only between 70 and 80 of these ever made. So,
so that, you know, that's an interesting distinction. You know, when people hear that there's electricity running to the clock, they wonder if it's an electric clock. But then there's this pendulum and all these weights. And so it really is a mechanical movement, just has a very limited function, right, Tim, for that electric motor?
Yes, that's correct, David. And in the history of this particular clock, the Hay and Peabody clock, it was originally, as you said, a mechanical clock with a motor lifting weights, and the weights as they fall would power the clock. So no electricity turning the hands or anything like that. At some point in its career, the gears were modified in that mechanical apparatus, and an electric motor inserted in there to actually turn the hands. And so, one of our members, Mark, he had the job of trying to replicate those original shafts that the gears were on, because they had been modified for this electric motor. And so he had to try and recreate all that, which he did beautifully. And, to get it back to its original function, which is a mechanical clock. It's all gears. The pendulum is beating, every 1 second, and that's what keeps time and moves these gears. So it's all mechanical.
Now, Tim, you may have said this, but it's true. A couple of very famous or high-profile Seth Thomas clocks. The clock at Grand Central Station in New York City is supposedly a Seth Thomas, as was the famous clock in the film High Noon. Does that jive with your expert knowledge?
It does. I don't know if I was around for High Noon, but I have read that.
Okay. Yeah, so the oldest, or certainly one of the oldest clock manufacturing companies in America, going back to the early 1800s, right? Here's a couple questions. So there's another question about other significant manual or mechanical clocks, not electric clocks, in Greater Portland. People might see, and any chance of a walking tour that might go to Sarah as well. Anybody know of other mechanical clocks of note in the Portland area?
Maybe I can help to get started, and then maybe Sarah can help with the tour side. Yes, there are other mechanical clocks in Portland. The ones I'm aware of are tower clocks. So I believe there's one in the North School at the end of, over on the east end of Congress. And I'm pretty sure there are others. I just don't know where they are offhand, but it's a great idea. A tour of these would be welcome. There's also a clock in the Custom House, in the center of the Custom House down on Commercial Street. That's a beautiful clock as well. So I'm sure there are more. I'm just not aware of them.
Okay, Sarah, are you up for putting together a walking tour someday in the?
Always. Yeah, I don't know that anyone's ever requested a walking tour of historic clocks, but I think that would be super fun. And we actually do tours during non-pandemic times of the Customs House as well. So we show off that clock quite a bit. But yeah, I think that's a great idea. We are very lucky to have a very incredible army of docents that work with us at the Portland Observatory, at the Customs House, and our general walking tours. And they are amazing researchers. And so I'm sure that we could pull something together. So it's on our, consider it on our to-do list.
I've got a question from our good friend Arthur Fink. This one is about the difference between an electric clock and a mechanical clock. Obviously, in this day and age, it's easier to have perfect time kept by an electric clock of some kind. But Arthur says there's something special and valuable about a clock whose very mechanism keeps the time. Can you talk about what he calls the spirituality of a clock? Tim, that's got to be for you.
Oh my goodness, that's a tough one to answer. I think for many of us that are part of the National Association, there is maybe a spiritual connection with clocks. We just, we're addicted to them. We love to see the mechanical clocks. Many of us work on them, so there is a beauty to them. The nice thing for me personally about this clock is that the pendulum is so long, and as you know, as the pendulums get longer, they swing at a slower rate. Or frequency, and this one is about every second. The clocks we work at in our shop, beat a lot faster than that. You know, tick tock, tick tock, tick tock. Where this one is a nice mellow tick tock, tick tock. So, you know, there is some peace in that. I think just it's very what I want to say. It's just really nice, serene to have that nice slow tick tock.
Very cool. That's a great question from Arthur. And he also asked one that I think goes to Jonathan. And he says, it looks like with the rust and other corrosion, the clock casing lost much of its structural strength. You talked about that a little bit, Jonathan. How did you manage to augment that with what was left there and have it be historically accurate and stay strong?
Well, most of the structural strength of the cast iron remained. The real place that was compromised, as I mentioned earlier, was that main bolt that went through the center of it. And that corroded section was literally cut out of the pipe, and it was just a piece of commercial, you know, 1.5 inch pipe. So it was cut out and a new piece welded in. And, you know, otherwise it was more surface that had deteriorated rather than structure. I want to answer a different question that you answered earlier about the interior of the clock, because the thing you don't think about is the surfaces of the castings on the inside. And the way the main globe was put together, they were like strips of metal that are screwed on, and they weren't painted on the inside. They put the whole globe together before they painted it. And so when I went to remove those sections, there had been a lot of corrosion in there. So it was really important for me to make sure those surfaces got coated on the inside. So there, it would, if moisture got in there, and there's a sealant in there, so it shouldn't, but if it does, those aren't going to corrode anymore. There's so many multiple fasteners that hold it together that no one of them is critical, except for that big bolt in the center. But one of my challenges was actually painting the insides of the columns and the inside of the little finial that fits on top and so forth, because there had been a lot of corrosion going on the inside that you couldn't see on those unpainted surfaces. So that was really an important challenge for me to make sure both interior and exterior were coated.
Fantastic. Well, we really appreciate everybody's contribution to this effort, not only those who are on the panel today, but their colleagues and so many in the community who were recognized in the video. I'd like to bring us to a close in a couple of minutes here with just a quick round of comments from any or all of the panelists. I'll just kind of start it by asking, in just a word or two, what brings you the most joy in seeing this restoration completed? So what brings you the most joy in seeing this project done? And I'll see who jumps in first.
Seeing it done. Seeing it done. It's literally started in 2015 and it's 2020 and it's finally done. So that brings a lot of enjoyment, seeing that clock, the finished product out there.
Fantastic.
And not seeing the way it used to.
Who's next?
I'll jump in next.
Go ahead, Jonathan.
It thrills me the way it looks, the final appearance, and its functionality are thrilling. And I also like, because of the coatings that I use, knowing that it's going to be that way for a long time. I won't be around the next time that it has to be worked on, at least for the structural part.
That's great.
I'll jump in.
Tony.
I really enjoy sharing this, sharing the story. It sort of completes the story of this 5-year story of restoring the Francis and the property, but just being able to share, this beautiful landmark with the city of Portland and everyone that walks by, and our guests and people who visit the neighborhood. And I mean, I think it's really great to be able to do that.
Wonderful. Sarah, any last thoughts?
Sure. Well, I would just say it's just a lovely bright spot on Congress Street. It's it's such a community landmark, like you said, and I think everyone. It's just a really nice way to draw you into that area, that part of Congress Street, and it's just a treat, I think. So thank you guys again for all of your efforts. Yeah.
For me, it's really a lot about pride in Portland and pride in Maine, and the incredible collaboration on a project like this. And of course, there were so many wonderful projects in Portland that only happen because of generosity and collaboration. So I'd like to thank everybody again who played a role in either inspiring this, helping with information, resources, neighbors, business leaders, historic preservation staff at the City of Portland, Greater Portland Landmarks, and so many people who contributed time, talent, and I guess more than anything, inspiration to get it done. So I want to thank everybody. One more thank you to Avenue Media for producing today's event. We're so thrilled that people joined us. We would like to have had this in person, but we reached out to perhaps a lot more people using media this way. So we'll sign off here, but make sure you come visit the clock. Listen carefully for that slow tick tock and think about the heart that's beating inside that clock. And thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Have a great day.